Julius Caesar, like many other historical figures, can be credited for creating the foundations of modern Europe and contributing in many ways to how humans wage war and how men seek to gain power and keep it. For without these influences, our world would have looked very different. I will start with modern Europe. When Julius Caesar defeated Vercingetorix in Gaul and Pompey and his allies in Caesar's civil war between 49 and 45 BC, he had started to effectively lay the foundation of modern Europe because of his efforts to unify Rome under his rule as dictator. If Rome never had a Caesar, Rome might have stayed a republic. It most likely would have been stronger than it was an empire. It could have repelled the barbarian invasions later on. But it was an empire, not a republic. Rome fell and disintegrated completely. Rome also had many different cultures embedded into its own. Rome was largely polytheistic and tolerant of other religions. So when the Roman Empire began to fall, it disunited all the religious factions and, in effect, caused hundreds of years of religious warfare, mostly between the forces of Islam and Christianity. We can see the effects to this day: violence in the Middle East, terrorism throughout the world, and needless bloodshed. The disintegration of Rome also influenced the creation of separate nation-states, empires, and nations. These nations would go to war with each other for many reasons, but mainly to maintain the balance of power, which would create Europe as we know it. According to an article in New York Times, without modern Europe, we wouldn't have the debt crisis that is so worrisome today. We wouldn't even have the USA, a hyperpower that influences world affairs every day. The disintegration of the Roman Empire in many ways led to the composition of the world, of how the world looks like today. And without Caesar, the Roman Empire would not have become an empire and fell. It's all interconnected, and Caesar was the catalyst who started the chain reaction. Many sources identify a well-known quote, "I came, I saw, I conquered," that Julius Caesar spoke, and a quote that largely is an underlying theme in human affairs throughout history and warfare. Caesar's military genius has in various ways shaped the world. Multiple military commanders throughout history and today have meticulously studied the battles that Caesar fought and the campaigns that he waged. The most notable military contribution would be Caesar's commentaries on the Gallic and Civil Wars. Military academies throughout the world and throughout history, like West Point, have intensely studied Caesar's tactics and strategies when waging war. Some of them are even used today in different forms. From the way he equipped his legions and how he made them march, to how he used brilliant strategy when fighting the Germanic tribes. Caesar's military brilliance has influenced modern warfare in the 21st century. In the war in Afghanistan, the way the U.S. military equips its troops alludes to the way Caesar equipped his own. The distance that U.S. troops march resembled that of his legions. A page dedicated to Julius Caesar on encyclopedia.com reveals that the haircut Caesar made his troops adapt, the buzz cut, or also known as the high and tight, was created to prevent the enemy soldier from grabbing the longer hair of the Roman soldiers, pulling it back and slicing their throats. Military campaigns and battles that were waged in previous centuries and which sometimes determined the fate of history could have dramatically changed the world we live in today if Caesar's military techniques were not used. Furthermore, one can see the various parallels of civil war in the world we live in today. President Bashar al-Assad and his Ba'ath Party is currently fighting against his own citizens in order to keep his power, which alludes to when Pompey and Caesar fought each other to keep their power and used citizen soldiers to do so. The assassinations that multiple governments execute also shows the relationship between Caesar's own assassinations by Brutus and Caesar's order to kill Vercingetorix, his arch nemesis in the Gaul campaign. The U.S., using its Hellfire missiles and special operators, has killed prominent terrorists like Afia Saduki, Abu Khabab al-Masri, and Abu Faraj al-Libi. Lastly, Julius Caesar also undoubtedly molded how men seek to acquire power and keep it. In other words, he had a direct impact on Machiavellian philosophy. Constitution.org reports that according to Machiavelli, Caesar was a pragmatic ruler of Machiavellian fame. The careful, persistent strategist. Caesar was a calculating genius. He received notable praise from Machiavelli and was provided a good example of what kind of prince you should be in the book The Prince. This book was historically a highly influential book read by many rulers of Europe and a book still read today by many politicians and rulers. One could argue that the many conflicts going on this year are of Machiavellian type. Conflicts that Caesar didn't directly influence, but was nonetheless a figure that power-hungry men would look up to as a guiding principle. As there were many figures in history that one could argue influenced the composition of Europe today, Caesar was probably the most instrumental on the fundamental level than any other figure. He created the scaffold for political, social, economic, and religious developments that affect the world we live in today.